Hello and welcome to the Ask the Expert session for Security for All. We've got a great set of experts today to answer all the questions that you might have about our security announcements if you watched our earlier session today at Microsoft Ignite. We're really excited that you're here with us today, and we've got the next half an hour with Andrew, Irina, and Alim, our product experts to help answer your questions. Let's run through a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. First, we've got these great experts here. We've got a team of SMEs behind them answering questions as well. So make sure you use that chat function to ask your questions. Make sure you upvote those questions that you really want to get answered, and we'll answer those questions either in the chat, and if they're really important questions, we'll make sure that one of our live presenters can answer those questions as well. And as always, and it kind of goes without saying that the session one is recorded. And to make sure that you help our moderators, if you've asked the one question, don't keep spamming the chat with additional kind of copies of the same question. And we expect everyone to adhere to the Microsoft Code of Conduct, which is pasted into the chat window and shown here for you as well. So make sure you take a look at this and adhere to that Code of Conduct. And like I said, this is the Ask the Expert session for our Security for All session that was hosted by Vasu Jakal earlier today. And in that, we talked about a variety of announcements across security, identity, and compliance. And so you can see here on this slide, we made a variety of announcements around Azure Sentinel, Microsoft Defender for security, some passwordless announcements and decentralized identity for identity, and a variety of compliance announcements, including co-authoring of information protection protected documents. And we made some announcements around our skilling capabilities with our 4 new SCI security certifications that are becoming online today in our beta launch. So those are, if you didn't catch the session, you should go back and check it out. These are sort of the basics. And so I wanted to then turn it over quickly to our experts. And we've got 3 experts on the call today. We've got Andrew Conway, who leads our security product marketing, Irina Nechaeva, who leads our identity product marketing, and Alim Rayani, who leads our compliance marketing. So with that, I am going to go ahead and ask our experts a few questions. Let's start with Irina. Irina, we made a set of passwordless announcements today. I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about what passwordless is and why it's important to our security posture for our customers.
Absolutely. Thank you, Adam. Passwordless for us has been one of the big, probably the biggest announcements in this Ignite, because now passwordless authentication is generally available for cloud and hybrid environments. That means any customer can now deploy this technology across entire organization. Why we think it's more secure is that because passwordless authentication is inherently a multi-factor authentication, right? This is based on the open standard that we've been developing with the Fast Identity Online Federation, and this is really a strong authentication method that always inherently has multiple factors, which can be something that you are, or something that you have, and something you know. It also makes it much easier for the end user, right? In the sense that it often combines those multiple factors in just one action. And that it also frees people from the need to use passwords, which is usually the weakest link in your defenses. And we have some really interesting studies where we've learned in the study between the Ponemon Institute and Ubica that people on average use 5 passwords between all of their accounts, right? It just gives it so much room for the bad actors to breach it. So that is definitely for us the biggest announcement of this Ignite, and I really hope that all of you will get to try it.
That's great, Irina. I think that there's a lot of questions in the chat, so we'll bring a few of those back in there too, because passwordless is a super top of mind item. Hey, Alim, I might ask you the same question. Like what were the top announcements that you made? I know I saw your demo of the co-authoring and using protected Microsoft information protection policies there. I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about what we announced today.
Yeah, so one of the big themes of what we announced today was this idea of protecting data and protecting information, and not just sort of in the Microsoft 365 lens of things, but also more broadly. And so one of the ones that we've been working on for a while with respect to Microsoft 365 is this idea that you don't have to make this trade-off between security and collaboration. Especially in the remote work world, we're all working, in some various endpoints, or many people are working across various, sort of devices and areas. And so this idea of being able to protect a document through encryption or labeling, and then being able to collaborate on that without having to take it offline, save a version, re-upload it, go through that whole process is really powerful. And we finally, I would say, cracked the code, if you will, on this, and we're able to launch this so that you can have that real-time collaboration and maintain that level of protection, that level of security. So that was a huge investment, a long time coming. Really proud of the work the engineering team has done to bring that forward. And then if you just think about the broader concept of, protecting sort of data inside your organization, you want that to happen, wherever it is, whether you're in a Teams chat and you're sharing something, you're on a device like a Windows device on the endpoint, or you're in a browser, whether that's Edge or Chrome or Google Chrome. And so that was really the nucleus, I guess, if you will, of this set of announcements around just protecting data. And of course, we talked about extending into structured data systems with Azure Purview. So that was also part of that data protection push.
That's awesome. Great. Andrew, I might just come around to you then and complete kind of the horn of security, compliance, and identity, and talk a bit about what we announced today. I know we made some improvements to Sentinel and Defender, so if you could tell us a little bit about the announcements from today.
Yeah, it makes sense. Thank you, Adam. Excited to be here today to go through this. To your point, the biggest thing that we're doing really is continuing to simplify that experience for defenders. We are defenders at Microsoft, and we know there are a lot of defenders out there in the community that work in security operations centers. And so our goal is to deliver that integration across what we refer to as XDR, or Extended Detection and Response, with Defender, and connect that with SIEM and Sentinel. And so we announced that across Sentinel and M365 Defender, we are now sharing incidents, we're sharing schema, we're sharing user experiences. And then as we go on this Defender journey inside M365, we're bringing now the experiences from Defender for Endpoint and Defender for Office 365 into that integrated Microsoft 365 Defender portal. We're also shipping new capability into that Defender experience, M365 Defender, something called Threat Analytics. What this means is we're taking expert guidance, we're taking research from Microsoft Threat Intelligence teams, we're making that available directly inside Defender, so security teams can understand what's going on, they can prevent, they can mitigate active threats. And then on the Sentinel side, we're making Sentinel ever more useful by adding more and more connectors to bring in data from different clouds, from different platforms into the Sentinel experience.
Cool. Thanks, Andrew. Just kind of looking at the Q&A and kind of what's coming in. There's a few for identity, and Irina, I wonder if you could talk to us a little bit more about the announcement on the conditional access authentication context. There's a question as to does that require Azure Active Directory and MEM, and how do the two work together or not? I wonder if you could talk to us about that.
Absolutely. So this is a really cool enhancement to our kind of the policy engine at the heart of our Zero Trust solution. And authentication context is something which makes it possible to set up even more granular policies, which are based on the user actions, not necessarily just the app that they're trying to access. The example that you saw is based on Azure AD and Microsoft Endpoint Manager working together, but it's just one of the scenarios, right? And you have many different ways in which you can use that different authentication context based on what your organization needs. One example, you can, for example, block access to confidential SharePoint documents to the geographies which are outside of the geographies where your company operates, or you even can limit it to only the geographies where your team members are present. That said, though, we always say that the best protection is from integrated solutions working together. And here is where Azure AD and Microsoft Endpoint Manager they share conditional access as that policy engine. So when you use them together, you get even stronger protection.
Yeah, that's great. I know there's a variety of questions in there, so I think that's a really helpful one. Aleem, on the compliance side, there's a few questions in here about purview and information protection. I wonder if you could just talk a little more about how those work together, how you can think about those policies interacting across those going forward.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so essentially the way it works is, so what Purview really does is, part of what it does is it creates this data map and allows you to connect to these other sources, whether that's, sort of an Azure source or something like Amazon's simple storage service or AWS S3 or other sources. And so what you can do and the way these things work together is if you're in the Microsoft 365 Compliance Center and you already have policies that you've set up for data classification, you can then extend those policies through to Azure Purview, which connects to all those sources. And actually, as part of our preview, we already have customers that are starting to leverage that connection. So you have this consistency between what you're classifying in unstructured data sources. So think of that as something like, email or chat or whatever else, or documents, and then structured data sources where you have databases connected and other solutions connected. So really, my counsel would be is, or my guidance would be go to the Microsoft 365 Compliance Center, set your policies once there, and then extend those through to Purview, and you can leverage those for those connected data sources.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks, Aleem. Andrew, there's a question here that I think is great. It says, what are the most important things I should be doing right now to secure my Azure environment?
That's a great question, and I think it's especially pertinent given some of the threats that we've seen out there most recently. The most important thing is really to make sure that you have MFA set up, first of all, on admin accounts. I will come back to some of the feedback that Irina has given around passwordless. But what we've seen is that, if you have an admin account and it's only protected by username and password, that's heading in the direction now of negligence almost from a security point of view. You have to bring in that second factor. Otherwise, you're going to be vulnerable to phishing attacks. You're going to be vulnerable to password spray, really any kind of these identity-based attacks. Next thing that I would do is make sure that you're using Azure Security Center. Azure Security Center is a wonderful place where you can get visibility across not just your Azure deployment, but as it turns out now, multi-cloud deployments as well. So we're giving visibility into hybrid, Azure, GCP environments. And so that's what we would call cloud posture management. So Azure Security Center gives you that visibility as to how your workloads are being set up across your environment, across different tenants. And so that's another great thing that you can do. And then as you think more forward into your architecture, start to dig in on zero trust. Start to look at how you're thinking about privileged accounts in Azure. Start to think about the devices that you use to actually allow access and deploy things like conditional access. And so I would start with MFA. I'd get the visibility from configuration and posture in ASC, and then I'd start to think through that broader zero trust journey and how you can progress your zero trust approach. And there's plenty of content out there which we can follow up on around the Zero Trust Deployment Center, which can give people guidance on the different steps around ZT.
That's great. I think speaking of ZT, there's a question here just sort of around passwordless authentication and how customers should think about that with their legacy applications. Irina, I wonder if you can help tackle that one.
Absolutely. And thank you, Andrew, for encouraging everyone to use MFA. This is definitely one of the first steps you can take to just to be more secure. With the legacy applications, I think it really is as simple as use all of your applications with connect them all to Azure AD, right? And as you hopefully know, we're bringing more and more capabilities to help you connect all the applications to Azure AD. And then as long as they're connected, you can apply those passwordless methods to all the applications that use use Azure Active Directory with a single sign-on. And specifically, we'll talk more about legacy apps in the identity session that is going to happen tomorrow at 5 p.m. Pacific time. But we will be talking about the native tools in Azure AD Application Proxy to connect your legacy applications, including header-based authentication, as well as new partnerships in our secure hybrid access partnership to help you use existing security tools to connect legacy apps to Azure AD.
That's great. Thanks, Irina. I'm actually going to take one of the questions directly. There's a whole bunch of questions around certs and learning and the technical content. I just posted an announcement in the Q&A where you can go and find the links to our security technical content library. And that's the place where you can go and get information and find learning paths, certs, all of our technical blog content, technical learning and interactive guides, so you can go there. And we are announcing these 4 new certifications. We're basically creating a new fundamentals for security. We're creating a security operations certification, an identity admin cert, and a compliance certification. So these are 4 brand new certifications that we're really excited to help you learn more, to get deeper in your journey as you think about security, compliance, identity. And these are really tailored toward particular roles versus just generic kinds of kind of content and learning. So it's really about helping you get better at the job that you do day to day using our Microsoft technology. So check out that link and you can take a look at all the content that's available there. Let me just do another quick look at the Q&A and see if there's another one that we can bring up here. There's all, the identity stuff is very popular. So I think that we'll come back around to you, Irina, and ask another one there. But I know, we announced threat analytics today, Andrew, from a security perspective. And there's a few questions around kind of how we think about threat analytics and where that data comes from, and how we, how we think about the roadmap of feeds that go into threat analytics and where we want to use that.
Yeah, thanks, Adam, for queuing that up. Threat analytics is a capability that we've had for a little while now in Defender for Endpoint, so Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. And the goal there was really to start to expose some of the guidance from our Defender research team and from other threat intelligence teams at Microsoft, as well as industry research directly into the experience. And this combines super well with another capability that we have available in Defender for Endpoint called Microsoft Threat Experts, which means that we give targeted attack notifications directly into your tenant. And so as we hunt across aggregate data, if we find interesting things, we can publish that directly into your tenant as part of what we call Microsoft Threat Experts. What we've announced today in preview is that we're extending that capability now broadly across Microsoft 365. And so from a roadmap point of view, Adam, what this means is that we're now in preview of delivering that capability, but on a much broader canvas. And so we're connecting now together identity with cloud application data, with endpoint data, with email data inside Microsoft 365 Defender. So think of threat analytics as something now that lives in the broader Microsoft 365 Defender. And it also gives you practical guidance as well. So it's not just giving notifications now, it's giving you guidance on things that you can do to actively mitigate the threats that are being flagged inside the console experience.
That's great. We'll take a little bit of a turn, and I think we'll start with Irina, but it might be interesting to hear from all three of us, or all three of the experts here around, there's a bunch of questions in the Q&A on like, what do I have to buy to get all this stuff? And I think that we've done a good job of making it easy, and you can buy a couple things and get most of what we need from a security perspective. But particularly on the passwordless, Irina, there's so much energy on passwordless. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about, what are the different tiers you might need? I know there's this is accessible across a range of those. So I wonder if you could take us through that for a minute.
Absolutely. The good news is that the passwordless authentication can be used for any Azure Active Directory customer, including those who use Azure AD free. And then just as a reminder, Azure AD free is available to any Microsoft customer using the commercial subscription service. What's even more awesome, that passwordless authentication is also available to all of our consumer customers. So for over 800 million of those Microsoft accounts, we are already seeing quite a bit of usage of passwordless methods. So for kind of coming back to the Azure AD commercial customers, right? If you even have Azure AD free, you can set up multi-factor authentication with security defaults. That means that Microsoft will manage those policies for you, but you can use passwordless authentication method. And then if you do want to set up your own policies using our conditional access policy engine, and if you want to have access to the admin policies and the reporting, then you would need to upgrade to Azure ID Premium P1. But then again, any of the passwordless authentication method can be used with any of the Azure Active Directory pricing tiers.
Great, that's awesome. Thanks for walking that through. Just to kind of stay on that, just another minute or two on licensing. Aleem, I wonder if you could talk to us a little bit about our Microsoft 365 E5 offering, which is kind of our easiest way to get the things we need. And then Andrew, just to kind of close that loop, maybe you could talk to us a little about the Azure stuff. So Aleem, if you could start with.
Yeah, absolutely. So so many of the capabilities we talk about they're available multiple ways. So one is, as you mentioned, they're available with Microsoft 365 E5. And that's the full E5 bundle, if you will. And we see a lot of customers going to that because they want to leverage different components of our stack that work together. So we see a lot of that. And then also the capabilities are typically available in what we call like a smaller sort of standalone, if you will. So if you're just looking for, let's say, the information protection capabilities, you could go buy that component of it. The one exception here, I will call it, is Azure Purview, which is in preview, but that is not part of the Microsoft 365 E5 family. And as we go through the preview process, we'll roll out more information on the licensing of that from an Azure perspective.
Got it. Yeah, and on that, so that's a good sort of segue maybe to Andrew. I know we've got a variety of things that you can purchase in the Azure world with our consumed revenue kind of model and the services there. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about how that looks and how it's different than M365.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you, Adam. And customers, anyone on the call can get started in Azure with a trial and with an account. And then to your point, this is all set up in a consumptive way. And so there's consumption based on meters that run on the different services, and they'll all just form part of your monthly Azure bill. There's also significant free capabilities that are out there as well, notably in Azure Security Center, and there's free tiers in some of our consumptive directory services as well, with things like Azure AD B2C. And so it's a great point. Thanks, Adam. Everything on the Azure side is based around meters and are based around different consumption dimensions, and that will show up on the monthly bill, all in one place.
That's great. Thanks for tackling the licensing conversations. Those are always fun. Aleem, I want to go back to you. There's a question from Cliff, who also hopes you accept his LinkedIn invitation, about Azure Purview and how we might be able to how Azure Purview will can be trained to identify different kinds of data types.
Yeah. So first of all, Cliff, I will go look out for that LinkedIn invitation. I'm catching up on my LinkedIn invites, so I'll be doing that soon. But on the training thing, what I would lean into a little bit here, because Azure Purview is in preview. I know that's a mouthful when we say it that way, but is the investments we've been making on the trainable classifier side on M365 are around the ability, we have a set of sensitive information types that we recognize. And I think the number now is around 150 or so. There might be more than that. That's sort of our out of the box. But then oftentimes we get customers say, hey, I have a contract that looks a specific way or this different data type. And so we have introduced this ability to create trainable classifiers in Microsoft 365. At a high level, for those of you who haven't had a chance to look at it, is let's say you wanted to identify certain types of things in documents. You would point it to a document library. You need to have at least about 30 documents in there. Let's say point it to a SharePoint library. And then it would start analyzing that data. And then you would score the analyzing of that data. And once that model became stable, and you'd get a scoring mechanism to help you determine if it's stable, then you could go publish that model. The concept at a high level is the same here as any other classifier, if you will. We're just early days on the Azure Purview side. So you'll see many of the things that are in M365 light up an Azure purview at any given time in the future as we move forward. But there may be specifics that you're looking for. So again, Cliff, happy to follow up offline if there are specific things you want to do once we get connected on LinkedIn. But that's the idea. So this concept of trainable classifiers should be extensible wherever you go in your journey to go classify and govern sensitive information.
Cool. Andrew, a question for you around Sentinel and M365 Defender and the consoles there. There's a couple of different experiences there, and I know we're on a kind of way to converge some of our M365 experiences. Curious what, if you could just elaborate on how you think about those two different consoles relative to what those two different products do.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Thanks, Adam. First of all, we should think of Sentinel as a SIM solution. So it's bringing in all of the data from across the entire estate. Now, of course, given that we have this strong connection to Microsoft 365, we have this way to bring in the M365 data and also zero rate that data as well for a period of time inside the experience. But first of all, let's think of Sentinel as the SIM. That's where all of the connectors are and all of the third-party data flows in. As you think about Microsoft 365 Defender, that gives you the depth capability into the Microsoft security products. So it's where we bring together cross-domain protection for those of you using our identity protection solutions in Azure AD and Defender for Identity, Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Email. And so those security experiences will converge in Microsoft 365 Defender for the Microsoft estate. So that's how the two things work together. What we've announced at Ignite this time around is deeper integration. So we're going further on that journey. So we have a shared schema now between the two solutions. We have shared incident views. So you could see an incident in the SIM solution, for instance, and then drill down directly into Defender to remediate it. And then we're sharing user experiences as well. And so the two of them work very neatly together. They're both cloud native security solutions. We have this ability, of course, to share data from M365 into Sentinel and to zero rate that. And that's the experience journey that we're on as we move forward in sort of reinventing security operations in the cloud.
That's great. I think we've got time for a couple more questions. One for you, Andrew, quick follow-up. People are really interested in your t-shirt. I'm curious, maybe you have an Etsy page where you're selling, they're really a fan of your t-shirt. If you have something you want to plug there, just throwing that out there.
Yeah, this is really about my silkscreen printing business. That's what I'm here to talk about today. No, all joking aside, I knew that Passwordless was a thing for Ignite, and we've been on this journey. So for today, I dug out one of my old Ignite shirts. I think it was maybe a couple of Ignites ago, where we again put the focus on enabling MFA. All joking aside, it's one of the most important things you can do for your admin accounts and for all your users now. And so that's where it came from. It was a limited issue from a prior Ignite.
Good. Yeah, thanks for fielding that critical question. Irina, one for you. There's definitely a lot of interest in decentralized identity. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that, and if you have kind of news coming up that might be on the roadmap.
Absolutely. Well, decentralized identity is going to completely reset the way that we think about identity and sharing personal information, right? It's this trust frameworks in which identifiers such as usernames will be replaced with the identity that is self-owned, independent from any organizations and controlled by the individual. I really encourage you all to join identity session tomorrow at 5 p.m. where Joy Cheek will be sharing a lot of news about how we're making that real and actually how you will be able to use it in real life very soon.
Yeah, that's great. Super excited about that one. I think we've got about 1 minute left, so maybe I'll just wrap us up and say thanks again for all of our experts today, Aleem, Andrew, Irina. Thanks for checking out the session. You can go back and look at all the on-demand things there. You can check out the deep dive sessions across identity and compliance and security that we've talked about. We'll make sure those links get put in the chat. And we'll keep our SMEs around maybe just a little bit longer to try to pile through all the great questions that have been asked. So with that, I appreciate everyone being here today for Ignite. Hope you have a great rest of the show today and tomorrow and on your journey across security, compliance, and identity. Thanks.